Hello, everybody. Greetings, may peace and power and elevation be to all you beautiful people. This your girl Tiffany coming through live in effect. Happy Kwanzaa. Today is Kumba. Kumba means creativity. So happy Kwanzaa to all of you, those of you that are celebrating, and happy New Year's Eve for those of you that's gonna celebrate it. All right. Today, we're going to talk about two prominent people within the African American community and the Black community. We're going to be going into a topic about Selma Burke, who was a sculptor, and also we're going to be talking about Dr. Yosef Ben Jochannan, who was an African historian, also a writer and a lecturer. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get started. And make sure you share this channel, hit the notification bell, and also subscribe to it and all that great stuff. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Greetings to the brother in the chat room. I hope you can hear me. Greetings to the chat. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with Selma Burke. And who was she? So that's a picture of Selma Burke. All right, standing next to the picture of Franklin D. Roosevelt, and I'm going to explain that in a moment. And then I also have another picture of her. Oops, that's Dr. D, my bad. All right, I have another picture somewhere. Okay, give me a second. I'm trying to learn how to get things configured around here. All right, give me one second. I'm trying to find the picture. I downloaded the picture somewhere. All right, so that's a picture of Selma Burke right here. That's a beautiful picture of her. That's her making the sculpture of the image of Franklin D. Roosevelt. So if you look on your dime, if you ever pay attention to the dime, that picture that's on there, that's Franklin D. Roosevelt on the dime. He represents the 10 cents. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and get started on her biography. Now, who was Selma Burke? And how did she play a role within the African American community? All right, so if you guys can see my picture or my screen. So let's go ahead and get started with her biography. Selma Burke was an American sculptor and a member of the Harlem Renaissance Movement. Burke is best known for a bas relief portrait of President Franklin D. Roosevelt that inspired the profile found on the obverse of the dime. She described herself as a people sculptor and created many pieces of public art, often portray of prominent African American figures like Duke Ellington, Mary McLeod Bethune, Booker T. Washington. In 1979, she was awarded the Women's Caucus for Art Lifetime Achievement Award. Okay. So now she was born on December the 31st of 1900 in Mooresville, North Carolina, the seventh of 10 children of Reverend Neil and Mary Elizabeth Cofield Burke. Her father was an AME church minister who worked on the railroads for additional income. As a child, she attended a one-room segregated schoolhouse and often played with the riverbed clay found near her home. She would later describe the feeling of squeezing the clay through her fingers as a first encounter with sculpture, saying it was there in 1907 that I discovered me. Burke's interest in sculpture was encouraged by her maternal grandmother, a painter, although her mother thought she should pursue a more financially stable career. Burke attended Western Selman State University before graduating in 1924 from the St. Agnes Training School for Nurses in Raleigh. She married a childhood friend, Durant Woodward, in 1928, although the marriage ended with his death less than a year later. She later moved to Harlem to work as a private nurse. All right, so I'm going to start right there. The reason why I chose Miss Selma Burke is because since we're celebrating Kwanzaa and today is Kumba, which deals with creativity. Let me turn my speaker up. Since we celebrate Kwanzaa, which deals with creativity, this is a woman who was very creative. She became a sculptor, and she knew that as a childhood, from her childhood, that she wanted to make images. Now, that takes a lot of time and work and dedication to do, and it takes a lot of focus to recreate an image of an actual person. This is not painting, this is actually using clay and trying to make the image. So, by this being Kumba, this lady showed her Kumba through making images, through making statues, sculptures, and other card images. That's what she did. She used her natural talent, her gift that was given to her. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. As a matter of fact, give me one moment. I need to check my sound. Okay, sorry about that. Just want to make sure everything's good. Sound quality is okay. All right. Now going back. So right here, let's look at when she was with the Harlem Renaissance. So Harlem Renaissance and Education. After moving to New York City in 1935, Burke became involved with the Harlem Renaissance cultural movement through her relationship with the writer Claude McClay, with whom she shared an apartment in the Hell's Kitchen neighborhood of Manhattan. The relationship was brief and tumultuous. McClay would destroy her clay models when he did not find the work to be up to his standards. But it introduced Burke to an artistic community that would support her burgeoning career. Burke began teaching for the Harlem Community Arts Center under the leadership of sculptor Augusta Savage, and would go on to work for the Works Progress Administration on the New Deal Federal Art Project. One of her WPA works, a bust of Booker T. Washington, was given to Frederick Douglass High School in Manhattan in 1936. Burke traveled to Europe twice in the 1930s, first on the Rosenwald Fellowship to study sculpture in Vienna in 1933 to 1934. She returned in 1936 to study in Paris with Astrid Malao. While in Paris, she met Henri Matisse, who praised her work. One of her most significant works from this period is Frankella, which was in 1937, a portrait of a German Jewish woman in response to the rising Nazi threat, which would convince Burke to leave Europe later that year. With the onset of World War II, Burke chose to work in a factory as a truck driver for the Brooklyn Navy Yard. It was her option that during the war, artists should get out of their studios. Burke returned to the United States and won a scholarship for Columbia University, where she would receive a Master of Fine Arts degree in 1941. All right. And then later in life, in 1940, Burke founded the Selma Burke School of Sculpture in New York City. She was committed to teaching art. She opened the Selma Burke Art School in New York City in 1946 and later opened the Selma Burke Art Center in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Opened from 1968 to 1981, the center was an original art center that played an integral role in the Pittsburgh art community, offering courses ranging from studio workshops to puppetry classes. Burke used her art to make opportunities to bring people together. In Mooresville, Black children were banned from use of the public library. With her rising fame, Burke chose to donate a bust of a local doctor on the condition that the ban be removed. The town accepted. In 1949, Burke married architect Herman Colby and moved with him to an artist colony in New Hope, Pennsylvania. Colby died in 1955, and Burke continued to live in Pennsylvania until her death in 1995. All right. So now let's go down to sculpture. Or you know what? I'll go back. Yeah. So Selma Burke sculpted portraits of famous African American figures as well as lesser known subjects. She also explored human emotion and family relationships in more expressionist works. While she admired the abstract modernists, her work was more concerned with rendering the symbolic human form in ways both dignified and symbolic. She worked in a wide variety of media, including wood, brass, alabaster, and limestone. Burke's public sculpture pieces include a bust of Duke Ellington at the Performing Arts Center in Milwaukee, as well as works on display at the Hill House Center in Pittsburgh, the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Public Culture in New York City, Atlanta University, Spelman College, and the Smithsonian Museum of American Art. Her last monumental work, created in 1980 when she was 80 years old, is a bronze statue of Martin Luther King Jr. in Charlotte, North Carolina. All right. Burke was amongst the artists featured at the National Urban League Integral Expedition at Gallery 52 in 1978. She had solo expeditions at Princeton University and the Carnegie Museum, among other venues. Her work is held in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, and the Philadelphia Museum of Art. So now this is all her works right here. Before we talk about Franklin D. Roosevelt. This one's called Untitled Woman and Child, which was made in 1950. All right. And on the left, present her bust of Samuel Huntington to the principal of Samuel Huntington. All right. Brass relief of Mary Carlton Holiday, which is 1945 at the Iredell County Library in North Carolina. And the bust of Mary McLeod Bethune. And this is the one she did for Franklin D. Roosevelt. The Franklin Roosevelt plaque in the recorders of these building in Washington. All right, so here's the portrait. All right, Burke's best known work is a portrait honoring President Franklin D. Roosevelt and the Fourth Freedom. She competed in a national contest to win a commission for the sculpture, created from sketches made during a 45-minute sitting with Roosevelt at the White House. Burke herself wrote to Roosevelt to request a living live sitting, to which the president generously agreed, scheduling the first of two sittings on February 22nd, 1944. The president passed before the third such appointed could be met. Mrs. Roosevelt objected to how young Burke chose to present Roosevelt as, but she responded by saying, "The profile is not for today, but for tomorrow and all time." When asked about her experience sketching the president, she said he wiggled too much when she began to sketch him that day. She told him to sit still, and he did. The 3.5 by 2.5-foot plaque was completed in 1944 and unveiled by President Harry S. Truman in September 1945 at the Recorder of Deeds building in Washington, D.C., where it still hangs today. It is widely accepted that John R. Sinnock's observed design on Roosevelt dime was adapted from Burke's plaque. Sinnock later denied that Burke's portrait was an influence. Interesting. Then it goes on to say honors. Burke is an honorary member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. She received several honorary degrees, honorary doctorate degrees during her lifetime, including one award by Livingston College in 1970 and one from Spelman College in 1988. Milton South, then governor of Pennsylvania, declared July the 29th, 1975, Selma Burke Day in recognition of the artist's contribution to art and education. Her papers and archives are the collection of Spelman College. Burke was a member of the first group of women along with Louise Nevelson, Alice Neal, Georgia O'Keeffe, and Isabel Bishop to receive Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Women's Caucus for Arts in 1979. She received the award from President Jimmy Carter in a private ceremony in the Oval Office. She received a Candace Award from National Coalition of 100 Black Women in 1908 and the Pearl S. Buck Foundation Women's Award in 1987. Burke died at the age of 94 from cancer in the early fall of 1995 on August 29th. She died in New Hope, Pennsylvania, her home since 1950s. All right, so that's all for her story, and I also got some information I want to show regarding to the Franklin D. Roosevelt portrait. There we go. All right, see, Selma Burke, we're known for FDR portrait on the dime. Okay. So it was her portrait, her image, her carved image that influenced the dime, which is 10 cents. So when you look at it and you compare that, you will see that's her work. All right, and that's a picture of Franklin D. Roosevelt on that 10-cent dime. All right, then. So it says Burke's most famous work, a portrait of President Franklin D. Roosevelt that now graces the dime, came about from a competition to sculpt the president for the Recorder of Deeds office in Washington, D.C. After feeling she couldn't capture the likeness of Roosevelt from photographs, Burke wrote the White House and, to her surprise, was granted a seating with the president. So, again, that's the image. And if you want to look more, you can just go on the ncdcr.gov website, which is the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. And there you will find more information about this. So the title is Selma Burke, we're known for FDR portrait on the dime. All right, so that's all the information I have about Selma Burke. So now the next person that I'm going to go to is none other than Dr. Ben. That's who I'm going to go to. So I'm going to go to Dr. Ben, and I'm going to look at his biography and his books and maybe his lectures. All right. So that's what I'm going to do. So let's go ahead and get started. So who was Dr. Ben? Let's look at Dr. Ben for a moment. This is Dr. Ben, who is the ancestor. That's him, and later on in life. That's Dr. Ben again. As you can see, that's the image of him. That's him when he was giving a lecture. So let's look at who's Dr. Ben and what type of work has he done for the Black community, how he influenced as far as being a historian is concerned. All right. All righty. All right. So according to the information, it said that Dr. Ben was born on December the 31st of 1918. All right, and he was referred by his admirers as Dr. Ben. So he was born as Yosef Alfredo Antonio Ben Jochannan. All right, he was considered as one of the most prominent Afrocentric scholars. So here's his early life. Here's his early life. Dr. Ben, who was born Ben Jochannan, said that he was born in Ethiopia to a Puerto Rican Jewish mother and an Ethiopian Jewish father. Other sources say that he was probably Puerto Rican, but claimed to be of Ethiopian Jewish extraction. Colleagues and family members have questioned his account of his origin. So therefore, nobody really knows where Dr. Ben was born, or if he was either Ethiopian and Puerto Rican, or he was Puerto Rican. Nobody really knows. Okay. So maybe during his time period when he was coming up, they didn't have like what we got today, birth certificates and social securities and all that. They probably didn't have that at that time period. So they had no way of actually giving account. So they only went by what he said, only went by the information that was given. So nobody really has an account as far as where he's originally from. Some people say he's from Uganda. Some people say he's from Ethiopia. But let's continue. So it says here, other sources say that he was partly Puerto Rican, but claimed to be Ethiopian, Jewish extraction. Colleagues and family members have questioned his accounts of his origins. According to some sources, Ben Jochannan was educated in Puerto Rico, Brazil, Cuba, and Spain, earning degrees in engineering and anthropology. In 1938, he is said to have earned a BS, which is Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering at the University of Puerto Rico. This is disputed. He stated that in 1939, he earned a master's degree in architectural engineering from the University of Havana, Cuba. He also claims to have earned doctoral degrees in cultural anthropology and Moorish history from the University of Havana and the University of Barcelona, Spain, respectively, and advanced degrees from Cambridge University in England. The university said it had no record of Ben Jochannan attending any classes there. That's interesting. It says, according to his obituary, Ben Jochannan holds honorary doctoral degrees from Sojourner Douglas College, which is in Baltimore, uh, Marymount College in New York, and Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn. A New York Times article published after Ben Jochanan's death reported that documents from Malcolm King College and Cornell shows Mr. Ben Jochannan holding a doctorate from Cambridge University in England catalog from Malcolm King College listing him holding two masters from Cambridge, according to Fred Luzzi, a communication officer at Cambridge. However, the school has no record of his ever attending, let alone any degree. Similarly, the University of Puerto Rico, Maya guest, where he also said he has studied, has no record of his enrollment. Oh wow, that's interesting. That's very deep. Hmm. So let's look at his career. Accounts agree that Ben Jochannan was raised in the Caribbean region and immigrated to the United States about 1940. He worked as a draftsman and continued his studies. He later stated that in 1945 he was appointed chairman of the African Studies Committee at the headquarters of the newly founded UNESCO of the United Nations. He said he worked for them until 1970. Ben Jochannan said that he began teaching East. All right, here we go. Anyway, career and later life. Accounts agree that Ben Jochannan was raised in the Caribbean region and immigrated to the United States about 1940. He worked as a draftsman and continued his studies. He later stated in 1945 he was appointed chairman of the African Studies Committee at the headquarters of the newly found UNESCO of the United Nations. He said he worked for them until 1970. Ben Jochannan said that he began teaching Egyptology at Malcolm King College in Harlem in 1950, but this volunteer-run effort was not founded until 1968. Mm. Hmm. When it started with 13 students. Okay, well, did they mean 1960? All right, anyways, it says he later taught at City College in New York City from 1973 to 1987. He was an adjunct professor at Cornell University. Ben Jochannan was the author of 49 books, primarily on ancient Nile Valley civilization and their influence on Western cultures. In his writing, he asserted that the original Jews were from Ethiopia and were Black Africans. He said that the Semitic white Jews later adopted the Jewish faith and its customs. According to his obituary, Ben Jochannan began his educational teaching in Harlem in 1967 at Haru at he worked as an adjunct professor in 1973 and 1987, of course, at Cornell University, Africana Studies and Research Center, etc. Then directed by James Turner. He also taught at other institutions, including the Malcolm King College in Harlem and Rutgers University. In 1977, he accepted an honorary faculty position with the Israelite Rabbinical Academy at Beth Shalom Hebrew Congregation in Brooklyn. Ben Jochannan appeared several times on Gil Noble's WABC TV weekly public affairs series Like It Is. In 2002, Ben Jochannan donated his personal library of more than 35,000 volume manuscripts and ancient scrolls to the Nation of Islam. In the years before his death, Ben Jochannan lived in Harlem, New York, in the Lennox Torrance co-ops. Ben Jochannan married 3 times and had a total of 13 children. He died on March 19th, 2015, at the age of 96 at the Bay Park Nursing Home in the Bronx. All right. Now it says that he was accused of teaching pseudo history. All right, so Ben Jochannan has been criticized for allegedly distorting history and promoting Black supremacy. In February 1993, Wesley College European Classics professor Mary Lakozwick publicly confronted Ben Jochannan about his teaching. Ben Jochannan taught that Aristotle visited the Library of Alexandria. During the question and answer session following the lecture, Lakozwick asked Ben Jochannan how would that have been possible when the library was not built until after his death. Ben Jochannan replied that the dates were uncertain. Lakozwick writes that Ben Jochannan proceeded to tell those present that they could and should believe what Black instructors told them, and that although they might think that Jews were all hood-nosed and shallow-faced, there were other Jews who looked like himself. African-American professor Clarence E. Walker wrote that Ben Jochannan not only confused Cleopatra the Seventh with her daughter Cleopatra the Eighth and stated she was Black, but also wrote that Cleopatra the Eighth committed suicide after being discovered in a plot with Mark Antony to murder Julius Caesar. This would be highly problematic considering Julius Caesar was assassinated 14 years before Cleopatra's seventh suicide. That's interesting. What interesting information. All right, so here's the bibliography. African origins of major Western religions. We are the Black Jews, the Black man of the Nile and his family, and Africa, mother of Western civilization, new dimension in African history, the myth of Exodus and Genesis and the exclusion of their African origins, Abu Simbel to Giza, a guidebook and manual, cultural genocide in the Black and African studies curriculum. All righty then, so that's all the information on Dr. Ben. Yeah, that's all the information on him. So I have some books. Ooh. Okay. Ooh, I have some books on Dr. Ben. This one is called The African Origin of the Major World Religion. Amon Sabah Sakana is the editor, but it says featuring Yosef Ben Jochannan, Charles Finch, Modupe Adoyoye, Singeye, Gabriel Medihi, and Wayne B. Chandler. So these are the books that I have. All right. Also, I have another book, which is called The Cultural Genocide. All right. And it says, Cultural Genocide is a Black and African Studies curriculum by Yosef Ben Jochannan. And I also have a DVD with the same title. Now, in his DVD, he gave his account that when he wrote this book, that he was not really being paid for it. And whoever published his book, they didn't have any form of agreement regarding to his book. So he have not been really compensated for his book. So he was saying that the publisher, they was making all the money, but he didn't receive anything from it. He didn't receive a dime. And Yep. So with that being the case, a lot of people have said that Dr. Ben's work is very pseudo, and there's some information that is outdated or that's inaccurate. Okay, because of the fact that he was standing on the position of Pan Africanism and Afrocentricity, just like any radical black scholar, they would try to make everything about Egypt pertain to just black people and nothing else. So that was Dr. Ben, but he was also he was very powerful in a way that he influenced many people and encouraged many people to study and get involved and reconnect with their history. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to play one of his videos that he did, one of his lectures pertaining to the black woman is God, or why he say black women are God. So which I think is very interesting. And Dr. Ben happens to be one of my personal favorites. He's one of my personal favorites because the man was very charismatic, very enthusiastic, and he was very serious about his work. So I thought he was a major influence for sure. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to play one of his videos.
I want to express my appreciation for all of you who invited me. And we're talking a subject that is going to be the hottest subject in the future. Why do you believe in God? And I guess that you, in this case, also indicate myself. And do I believe in God? No. That should make it easy. I know most of you are shocked. Well, God, she's dead now. She's been dead quite a while. When I needed some food, I went to my mother. When I cried, I went to my mother. When I dirtied myself, I went to my mother. And nobody says anything about my mother. When a man gets involved with a woman and a child is born, you've said to the man, you are the father. But when you got an argument with him, you tell him, God is the father of the child. Now, you've been double crossing. He is the father and God is the father. How? You either went in a bed in the house or in the bush or someplace else. But now you find that God is the father. Now, who is the father? Is it God or is it the man that you went to bed with? Let us examine this thing. There are three gods that you worship in the United States, predominantly. The first one is the Jewish God, not your God. I know some of you claiming to be Jews and so forth, and as my parents would have claimed, especially my father coming from Ethiopia, would claim as Ethiopian Jew that Jehovah is God. And at the same time, he says Jehovah is the God of the Jews. The first Jew in human history was a man named Avram or Abraham. Avram in Hebrew, A-V-R-M, or Jehovah in Hebrew, Jehovah. Abraham was born in the 21st dynasty. I think you should note that down. There were and is 96 pyramids in Egypt. The last pyramid was built in the 22nd dynasty. That means that if the first Jew was born in the 21st century, how can they charge Moses, who was supposed to be born in the 18th dynasty, that Moses led the people in slavery against the Egyptian government? And there were no Jews yet. That's the first God of the West. The second God is a God called Jesus the Christ. His mother supposed to have him without the benefit of one man. No man. Just think of it. No man touched her. Yet, in the discussion about the birth of Jesus the Christ, a man was supposed to engage with her 3 months before the marriage and then come back, didn't touch her, and noticed she was pregnant. Then he asked her, who does this situation belong to? She said, you. He said, thou art a what? Whore. That's what the Bible says. H-H-O-R-E. That's a prostitute who's been going with everybody that she couldn't find. The third, that's 1997 years ago. And the third person that we worship as a god, 1300 and 1600 and something ago, was a man in Arabia. And that man in Arabia who found this out to be a fact is called, I'd almost say Elijah, but Muhammad. Muhammad, you told me he's a camel driver. He was illiterate. He couldn't read the name Allah if it was written in letters big as this building. And then you say how he found it out? He went on a carpet down from Mecca to Jerusalem. Now tell me how a carpet operates, if it carried him or anybody else. Now these are your definite statement of your belief, how it started. So do you know, does the world start with Jehovah? No. For thousands of years, for at least 4,000 years before the word Jehovah is mentioned any place where billions of people have lived and died. They were worshiping Yahweh, they were worshiping Ra, they were worshiping one thing. They worship that you don't worship. They had a goddess. They had many goddesses. What happened to the goddess? Women, some of you are women. Aren't women worth worshiping? I worship my mother. I wouldn't be ashamed to tell you that. And I hope my father did. I think he was intelligent. He worshiped her. That's why they beat women so often in the American society. You all call it battered woman. Sound pretty, big name. But it's funny that the goddess disappeared and there's no goddess, not one in your mind. And I ask again, why isn't there any goddess? If there is a God, and there should be a goddess for the God, especially when you said that the woman is the mother of God. You said in the Catholic text, Holy Mary, Mother of God. If Mary was the mother of God, she is before God. She knew God when she didn't have a seed in her. God was nothing. How come that she became pregnant, got God in her, and then God comes out? This is based upon you. You said, a child born from a mother without a father who is married to her is a bastard, you said. Illegitimate. God, Jesus Christ qualified. He's illegitimate. His mother was married. Second, he's a bastard. His father was married. I did not say this. I am quoting from your text of things that you said. If someone find me to be wrong, please get up and say so now. Tell me the correction so that I may correct myself from the error. If not, I will continue. You said I must believe in God. When I was a boy, my mother, being following the Hebrew religion, she did until she died, and my father followed the Hebrew religion until he died. And I followed the Hebrew religion until I get big enough to know better. When I was small, a little fellow named Reynald got kicked, and he got ruptured and died. I asked my parents to go to the funeral like most of the other little kids, and my father said I couldn't go. My mother said I couldn't go. Well, that was enough. It meant I couldn't go. And then I asked my father when it was all over, why couldn't I go? And he said I was not a Christian. It was a Christian funeral. I said, but I know Renard. We were in the same class. And the kid that kicked him was a fellow Christian, and he died. My father's statement of his to me was that his God is different to my God. I started to think then, because I thought that all Mendes said is a difference in philosophy.
All right, so that's Dr. Ben's video, and I'm gonna play one more video by him. All right, so that was Dr. Ben's video regarding to his belief and um his view on God or whatnot. So I wanted to read something out of this book because I thought it was very interesting. Or no, the Cultural Genocide book. I wanted to read something that was pretty interesting in this book right here. All right, so in this book, he talks about slavery. Okay, right here, the Cultural Genocide, which I thought that was very interesting. So I'm gonna start here. It says, "Who is to control what is to be taught in African and Black studies curriculum in the School of America? The issue of what is difference between Black and African study is not given a thought in this dilemma. For it is a foregone conclusion that African studies will remain under the control of paternalist and neo-colonialist minded so-called white liberal Africanist authorities who have dominated from the beginning of the partition of Africa by French military forces during their invasion of Kita Kingdom of Morocco in 1830 CE, which was culminated at the Berlin Conference in 1884 and 1885 CE between the 12 colonist powers of Europe, Great Britain, and the United States of America as declared in what was later called the Berlin Act, all of which has been carefully recorded in Sir Edward Carcelet's three-volume work, The Map of Africa by Treaty, London, 1895, Sir J. Scott Kitty, and the Partitions of Africa, London, 1912, and the Berlin Conference, London, 1928, and of course, in countless other documentaries volumes from the late 1800s to the present. But why is the above information of such importance to African American, African Caribbean, and African Black educators? Because it is wisely written that he who controls your mind controls your very existence. A man that establishes his own values of right and wrong, pride and morality cannot be ruled successfully by any other man, woman, or child anywhere in the universe. So let's go ahead and skip on down. All right, so he goes on to say, the same leadership and union have gone ahead and established what the African American child in the city of New York public school system is learned about him or herself and African ancestral heritage, a heritage that is supposed to be free of any Jewish background, at least from the point of view expressed in the so-called lesson plans on African American history, the United Federation of Teachers Committee on African American History masterminded. Thus, on page 39A of the committee's masterpiece, the following appears. Slavery. The Black people were not the only one who were slaves. Many different people were slaves long ago. Some were white, some were brown, while others were yellow. When an army went to war and captured enemy soldiers, these soldiers became their slaves no matter what color they were. One of people who were slaves thousands of years ago were the Jews in Egypt. Their Egyptian master made them work very hard, building cities and palaces. They were also made to take care of the animals, homes, and fields of the Egyptians. It is believed that finally a man named Moses came to lead the Jews to freedom. They escaped with him from Egypt and then were able to lead much happier lives. The Black slaves in the United States learned about Moses and the Jews from the Bible. They composed songs about them, but when they sang these songs, they were really saying that one day they too would be free. All right, and it says what we have just read is surpassed on page 41 of the same masterpiece in terms of its apparent racial bigotry and religious demagoguery as a purely religious cultural group is present to the African American Black child in a manner suggestive of his or her exclusion from said group's experience in Africa solely upon the basis of color of skin and race. Total disregard for the fact that the story being told took place in the ancestral homeland of Kibulan, which he said that was the original name of Africa. of the African American child and displayed by these teachers. This is quite oblivious in the following extract from the UFT's lesson plan demonstration on page 41, as we find Moses was not black. Hmm. All right, so that's his book right here. This is the one that I was telling you about. You can find the lecture on here. So as a matter of fact, I will play the lecture, which is called Cultural Genocide. I will play that lecture in a moment. I got time today, so. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, they're going to stay on the website.
Maybe. Yeah. Maybe the one.
Okay.
First, I must say good afternoon to you and try to speak to you in deliberate terms. I've just returned from Africa Friday, and excuse me for not pronouncing Africa the way you may do, but then you're a little more articulate than I am. So I only have one way to say Africa, and that's the wrong way. Because I don't care if you spell it with a K or Q, it still isn't proper. The continent of Africa was called by the Greeks. As far as I can research, Alkebulan would be Ortega, Hesperia, Amonis, Libya, Ethiopia. Those names were all used before the name Africa. So I will say that for everyone using them, he or she must have had his particular reason for using them towards the continent. I can't find a way in which the continent was called by the people before the Christian era, except those names that I've mentioned. And in all cases, they're all incorrect. Incorrect because the African people never called the continent a particular name. If you want to say the time of the Christian era or the Common Era, they called it a particular name, I can go along with you, and then we can use Africa. Since there isn't a particular name before the Christian era or the Common Era that the indigenous people of Africa has used for their continent, I will continue to use the word Africa, whether with K. If you want to put a K, I will oblige you. And if you want to put an A, I will do likewise. In either case, you're still wrong. Now, I wrote a few years ago about, in 1972, I think, or 1980 or 82 or something like that. I can't recall a particular time, a small book. And the name of the book was The if I can recall correctly, it was cultural genocide in the Black and African Studies curriculum. The book, to me, is today as relevant as it would have been when it was written. We have not turned the corner, whether bad or good, against the writings in that particular book, so that if I had to write a book today on education, I would take the name of this book, change the dates, and put it out there. The funny thing, I didn't recognize it because it's so current that it will be accepted as a new book. But let me highlight some things about it and detail others. That book was written because they're in Brooklyn. There was then, with Rudy McCoy and a number of people, including Malcolm's wife, Betty, and I say that with due respect to her. I want to make that sure because a number of people find to criticize Betty in a very disastrous manner. I can't join them because my knowledge of Betty and respect for her goes beyond that point. So I will not join. That doesn't mean that I disrespect those who find necessary to criticize in the manner in which they do. Betty has since earned a PhD. I don't know, that could be designated quite differently than it really is. For most people, it indicates a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, and as I said before, the PhD, but I can interpret it different to mean bachelor's degree. You know what that could stand for. Is with due respect to all of you, it is bullshit. I know I got it, so, and the master's degrees is more shit. And the PhD is a lot of shit, quite high and deep. Now, I do have respect for it because it's a degree given by the master. When you have a master, you must respect your master because at least your master must have something over you in order to hold a position. Nevertheless, although we are the best dressed up slaves you've ever seen, we are that. I mean, you would detest hearing that you are slaves, but then what are you? By virtue of how we submit ourselves and who rules us, we must be slaves. If we want slaves, we will not be ruled by so many white people. And it doesn't matter if they're Jews, Christian, Catholic, atheist, or anything. Let's deal with reality. We are on the plantation. And it is a very comfortable plantation for some of us, and for some of us, it isn't. Talk about classes. We can't talk about classes because in reality, whether or not you're a class with a lot of money or you're in the class with no money, you're still a slave. So rather I don't know how you could boast because a car or a better house or whatever, that you have more than the other person like you, black I mean, you cannot boast of your class. The slave is just like, I think that Alex Haley wrote a book, if I am not mistaken by his name. It's called Roots or something. I don't know where he had this roots because I don't know how they can trace the name Haley back to Africa. He said that he had traced his ancestors and a bunch of white folks from Ireland back the west coast of Africa. And I want to know when did they got born in Africa. But Haiti was better than I must say that, because I can't trace my people to Staten Island. And he was able to trace them there. So I pick up my roots back to anywhere that black people live. But in particular, I will trace them back to Africa. But knowing how silly it sounds for one group of Africans to be telling another group of Africans, I am more African than you. It used to be a time, and I must admit this, one of the errors that Mr. Garvey made. And you know, some people, we speak of Mr. Garvey as if he didn't make errors. He made blunders, major ones. One of the things was to cause a fight between a black-skinned person who was light and a black-skinned people who were dark because of Du Bois. We don't need to ask if Du Bois was light, because we must be poor sight not to know that he was. But one of his remarks in response to Du Bois insulting him was calling him, Du Bois, a crazy, mix-up, almost white. Now, what do you mean by almost white? All of us had somebody in our family been raped. I'm using the word advisably, but I don't care how black you are in here sitting down. You had some white person been messing with your family. I don't care how light you are, or how dark you are, or how middle color, if you want to call it. You didn't escape. It was impossible for you to escape. Man, that's why I said, there is no reason that all black people shouldn't hate all white people. I cannot come to you and say, well, I am dark. How dark is dark? And therefore, and that's a shade, it's not a color. Therefore, I am better than the person who's lighter than me, and that's my mother. And then my grandmother is lighter than her. And then if I look hard enough, if I could find one, I might find one much lighter than her. And then I look at another white family, black white family over there, and make a comparison. When I am finished, all black people that recognize the fact that they are black, I cannot turn down one of them as my relatives. So we want to be clear, because I'm hearing today, especially now on the TV again, about the different characters on the TV and how white one is and how black one is, and all of them are had, excuse me please, as niggers. Let's get it down. That's the way the white man see us, and he hires us because he needs us. Only when he needs us is he going to hire us. And then we, fighting him, fight ourselves. With fighting ourselves, we weaken ourselves, and for each person that we fight in this matter of identification, we are less strong. So I said, every black person who identifies himself as a black person and wants to live as a black person is a black person. I am not going wrong with a torchlight looking for light-skinned black and dark-skinned black and all kinds of different blacks, like in that kind of thing. Garvey did it, and that was a mistake. It was many mistakes that he made, and I wish to, for instance, the mistake that only Christians could be members of the organization. You could not be a Muslim and be a member of Garvey's UNIA. Nor could you be, Ford is a good example. The man that wrote the UNIA's motto that they had, Harold Ford, left here and went to Ethiopia. Why he left was that Garvey forced him out of the organization, and the only problem Garvey had with him was that he was Hebrew and refused to give up his Hebrewness. I was once Hebrew, born in it, as my mother and as my father. I give it up. I don't have a use for it. I don't have a use for any one of them. Christianity, Judaism, Islam, they're the same junk. All they do is take money from me either on a Sunday, Christianity, on a Saturday, Judaism, and a Friday, Islam. That includes Farrakhan. I mean, let's talk. I mean, I know a lot of you ain't gonna like me because I hit your man, and that's all right. That I don't mind too. I don't mind you not liking me. I'm not here for love. I get a lot of that in the house. You can ask Gertrude and why don't get at. All right. Now we get ourselves clear with that understanding, and I must say I wouldn't have been able to write the book before that time because I was confused. I was confused believing that I was Hebrew, and to be Hebrew was something unique because I believed, number one, that the Hebrews had built the pyramids. There are the craziness about it. I had gone to Africa, to Egypt in particular, long before, but I return and still saying at that time, the Hebrews built the pyramid. Excuse me, you may not understand me. Jewish slaves built the pyramids. And I used to say too, I did, thank you very much, cultural genocide in the Black and African curriculum. Here's a copy. And this seems to be, yes, this, I must, no, I'm not going to blame you for this. Because, you know, me, ECA as associates. The man who does this is a thief. I like to tell people to say, ECA, when got no right, they had a contract to print this book. They printed this book, and the first day they printed it to now, it was 5 years ago, up to now, he have never given me a penny. And he continues to print it. Every dime he collects from this goes to his pocket. So that's Curtis Alexander. And he still does it to the day, today. So let us say what it is. I like to say just what things are about.
That's Dr. Ben and his lecture, and he's giving the account on the cultural genocide. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for watching, for tuning in. So, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and please be safe on this New Year's Eve, and be careful with this coronavirus because it's still around and ain't going nowhere. So, until next time, I'll reconnect with you guys later. With that being said, may peace and power elevation be to all of you. Please be safe, and I'll talk to y'all soon. All right. This is